Hello everyone and welcome to our CLIO webinar series. My name is Jim Albright and today we are going to explore some of the core big data challenges, use cases, and the capabilities needed to ensure end-to-end business analytics throughout your internal and partner ecosystems. Now before I introduce today's speaker, I'd like to take a moment to outline a few housekeeping items. First, we have muted all attendee lines. But during the course of the presentation, you may ask a question by clicking the drop-down menu under the Q&A section and then select All Co-Presenters before typing in your question. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the presentation, but should we run out of time, we will certainly follow up with you individually on any questions that we could not get to. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, so you will receive that link once that recording has been posted to our website at clio.com. So with that, I am now very pleased to introduce to you today's speaker, Mr. Brian Cooper, who is a Principal Solutions Architect here at CLIO. Brian has over 14 years experience helping global organizations uncover the financial and operational benefits of B2B integration throughout simplifying complex data processes. By working with companies within almost every industry, Brian holds vast domain expertise in key verticals such as supply chain, healthcare, financial services, and many more. And he'll be discussing some of these with us today. So Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. So I think just to get started, I think it's important to first go through and kind of put a definition around what big data is. And a quick Google search can give you an idea. It's really not just large files, right? Not gigs and gigs of data, even though that is part of it. It can be a massive volume of files as well. Thousands and thousands of files are being transferred at once. But it's both structured and unstructured data. And most of the times it's so big that it's too difficult to process at any given time. So in most enterprise scenarios, the volume of data either moves too fast or exceeds capacity for processing. So a lot of the buzz around the big data analytics piece today is really focused on the rise of today's analytics tools. But the problem is that before any analytics can be done, we first have to be able to integrate that data, be able to get it from all of its different sources and plug it into a single source, right, the data lake, to get that information to the analytics engine, right? The analytics engine isn't going everywhere to get it. It's looking in one spot and then performing whatever analytics that needs to happen. So this really means that we need to be able to move and transform the data, maybe aggregate it together to provide a simplistic way for the analytics engine to reference the data. But we need to have a way to do that. So looking forward, right, so why is it important? Let's first start there. So why is big data important, right? In order for businesses to capitalize on the big data that's in your infrastructure, whether it be trading partner information, whether it be internal applications, whether it be cloud-based applications, right? We have to be able to manage and process those huge volumes. And what that means is it needs to be either done in real time and ensure data privacy and security. So the governance around that. You'll hear some of these overtones the entire time around governance and security and things. So what are some of the benefits of using big data analytics, right? So there's cost reductions, there's better decision making, there's time reductions, right? Quicker, being able to make decisions faster, as well as being able to have new product development and optimized offerings. So when we look at some of the examples of these, right, cost reductions is, hey, I have an issue, and the faster I can resolve that issue, right? If I've had this issue before, and I'm running analytics and being able to understand what's happened, I'm able to solve that problem quicker and thus reducing my costs. When you start looking at time reductions, right, you're recalculating entire risk portfolios, right? So let's take an example of from a logistics company. So maybe there's some weather in an area, and you have trucking and logistics. You have some cargo that's pretty sensitive as far as its perishable goods, or it needs to reach its destination at a certain time. If I'm able to understand maybe the weather patterns and there's a storm coming, I want to route my truck around that storm so as not to be impacted by the weather. From a new product development, right? I think everyone has probably been to the grocery store and using your Kroger Plus card or your Publix value customer ID, right? You've paid for your order and you get your receipt, but you also get a bunch of coupons about items that you may have already purchased, and they're giving you a coupon for the next time. or potentially new products that they think that you might want to try. That's them studying and understanding their buyer and providing you with a new offering. And then smarter decision making, right? Being able to understand, potentially fraudulent behavior, right? It happens to me all the time because I get the luxury of traveling everywhere, right? If I scan my credit card in a city to pay for a gas in a city I haven't ever been to, I might get a notification that says, hey, are you sure this is you? Or maybe I'm in Atlanta at home and I get an email alert from American Express saying, hey, are you sure you didn't buy $7,000 worth of, new kitchen equipment in San Francisco? Absolutely, I did not. I'm at home. So it allows for that's how these companies are using big data and analytics to make customer satisfaction higher, right? Retain customers and make everyone understand what's going on. So looking at some of the market dynamics around the challenges that companies face, right? It's really around the digital transformation. People are evolving. Look at Target and Macy's, right? They've made a digital transformation and are reaching out to their customers, whereas Toys R Us and Sears, maybe they didn't do such a good job, right? They didn't evolve quickly enough, and they've suffered. So they're using the data that's available, and they've studied and they've made a change. And how they've done that is they've studied and used their mass amounts of historical data that everyone has stored in the back room somewhere or in an offsite facility, and they've pumped all that information in and have poured over it with an analytics engine to better understand what their buyers want, what their customers want. And that kind of leads us into this sort of machine learning and artificial intelligence realm, which is on a huge rise right now. And it's been able to allow us to move from a reactive state of, hey, this happened, what do I do now, to a predictive state, which is, how can I better predict what my customers are going to want? So that makes us more valuable to our customers, which brings in more money to us. And in order to do that type of analytics, we have to have, from a data collection perspective, we need the most timely and accurate data. The fresher the data, the better the decisions we make. So that's really a key component here, is being able to collect the data in an efficient way and hand it off to the analytics engine, right? Because the analytics engine is simply there to chew through the data and pick it apart and understand what the bits are, but it has to have that data in a place where it can look at it. So when we start looking at how your ecosystem evolves, right, you have your internal applications and your internal bits of data that you have stored in different databases and different applications, as well as your trading partner information. Maybe some of your customers have information that they share with you, as well as maybe a third-party repository where you're a part of a conglomerate where you can need to extract some of that information as part of your analytics. It could be a cloud-based application, right? There's all sorts of different avenues and different venues inside of everyone's ecosystem where we need to be able to cross the silos, like get information out of each one of those individual silos, as well as when mergers and acquisitions happen, right? So you acquire a new business. Now we have to figure out how to pull all that information into, right? So you have to have a way that's flexible and easy to use. And the basis behind all of that is really to make sure that the data is delivered in a timely manner, right? So going back to the definition, right, it could be thousands of files, or it could be terabytes of files. We have to be able to move both scenarios in the same efficient manner and be flexible when we do it. Because what happens is, right now there's a lot of people that are in what we'll call a pilot stage of these data analytics, trying to figure out what exactly that means and what exactly that can do for them, and how to best use all of this massive information that they've stored over the last 5 to 10 years. Right? They have all this information. Maybe it's even longer than that. But the idea is that as this analytics is on the rise, right, we have to be able to scale with it, because what's going to happen is when you start moving from the pilot to the production phase and businesses start to rely heavily on these analytical decisions that are being made from the data, right, that's going to be critical to have the most up-to-date information inside the analytics tool, which requires this framework around it from an integration perspective to be able to gather the data securely and govern it. So let's talk about some current common approaches. So typically what we see today is really, the first one is really an open source or a homegrown solution where You may have some custom code. You may have some applications that do parts of this, integration where I can maybe have a file gateway somewhere, and maybe I have an integration tool somewhere, and maybe I have a light BI tool somewhere. But it's not really, form fit to do this broader type of integration. And what happens is you end up putting a lot of customizations around it, and growing that at scale is really not a great decision. Being that, over time, it's going to eventually outgrow what you have, and now you have to go back and figure out how to make it work. And also, you might be limited to the options that you can choose, right? Maybe your solution that you have from a homegrown solution only supports one specific data lake integration component, and your analytics tool doesn't support that data lake. So now what do you do, right? So that's kind of a problem. The other approach that we see is a commercial off-the-shelf solution that allows you to have a data integration and data preparation, right? Maybe I need to combine some files from different places to merge them together. So I need an integration tool to kind of merge all that data and chew it up. And then potentially B2B aspects and A to A as well, right? So I need to get data in from my customers. My customers are sending me data. I need to have a secure methodology around how I do that, as well as provide visibility into all of this, right? I need to be able to understand where my files are, where they're moving to and from, and whether or not there's an issue with that transfer. Because if I'm not getting the right data in, I'm not able to put good data in the data lake, I'm not going to be able to make good decisions with my analytics tool. So now that we've talked about some of the market dynamics and some of the common approaches, let's kind of drill down into some of the issues. And really what the biggest problem is being able to integrate and collect data from all different places. Sometimes it's a protocol limitation. Maybe I don't have a protocol that my customer can use, or maybe I have protocols that they're not able to handle. The data readiness, right? It kind of goes back to the analytics tool is going to be most efficient when it has all the data in a single place and it can run through it. So I need to be able to collect all these different bits of information across your ecosystem and plug them into the data lake so that it can get it. And maybe it's faster if I am able to take some input from application 1, application 2, and maybe a cloud-based application, and merge those three pieces together in a form of an integration inside of a gateway, and then push that to the data lake so that all the analytics engine is doing is looking at that data itself. Again, going back to the governance, right? When we start looking at different avenues of business, healthcare, financial services, we start getting into personal PII, PHI information where, we need to make sure that this data is secure. So secure protocols, all of that comes along with exchanging data externally. If it's not inside our four walls, right, that's a paramount piece of the puzzle. We have to make sure that there's visibility and governance and security around anything we do externally. And then kind of tying back into the reliability and scalability is as these projects start to evolve from the initial, hey, let's try this out phase, to the, hey, that was really cool, I like the way that worked, to the, hey, now we're going to use that, but we want to do these 3 other things as well, right? So now if you didn't purpose build or think far enough ahead in advance of, we're building a solution for this one problem now, but that's not efficient. We need to be able to build it to scale with other projects too. So you don't want to just kind of silo yourself and focus simply on the task at hand, but let's build something that we can grow and build more and additional integrations with other forms of data externally or internally. The business intelligence portion of it really is that whole reactive versus predictive, right? Nobody wants to be reactive anymore. It's very inefficient. It's not helpful to businesses. It doesn't allow you to be forward thinking, right? You're reacting to an issue as opposed to every third Thursday of the month we see a spike for some reason. Well, there's a request for more of this type of good, or we're running out of stock here in this area of the country. For why? I don't know. It's football season. You're running out of chips in a grocery store. You want to be able to push and reroute your goods so that you don't have that shortage, you don't have that alert, so that you're able to address those needs prior to that event happening. And then the last kind of issue that we see is that there aren't a lot of vendors in the market right now that provide a complete solution to do all of these things. Maybe you'll have, the ability to connect to trading partners, but you won't have the flexibility on the data lake side. Maybe they don't even have a connection. So in that case, right, you're exchanging the data, you're pulling it in, and then you have to land it in front of the data lake, and then they have to ingest it, right? You're adding a hop. Or maybe you have, a great visibility into understanding where the files are, but you don't have any flexibility as far as protocols are concerned. You can only do AS2 or SFTP, right? It's not enough for your customers. So those are really some of the compounding issues that we see in the marketplace today. The deeper problem, as we've kind of alluded to, is one, it's really a newer technology. The analytics engine is coming along, right? It's really more of an idea. How do we really use this to make business decisions? But in order to make those decisions, in order to have the right information, we have to get the data first, right? There's nothing to decide on, or there's no data to look at if we can't get it from somewhere, right? If I can't get the data into the data lake for the analytics engine to run, there's nothing to analyze, right? It's kind of a useless tool. So that's the biggest problem, and it has the most impact, is the ability to integrate all across your ecosystem to get all the different types of data in a timely fashion. So when we look at the core capabilities that we see in the marketplace when talking to customers, is really this concept of streaming data. Because if I have a 20 gig file that I have to get from point A to point B, and point B being the data lake, and if I have to write that from my customer onto my disk first, and then I have to move it again, right? I'm moving 40 gigs. I'm doubling up because I have to write it on my disk, and then I have to do something to it. The idea would be, the best use case, right, would be able to stream it through, right? I need something that's intelligent enough to say, hey, I'm receiving this via SFTP, and oh yeah, I'm supposed to route that to this data lake. So instead of writing it to disk, I go ahead and make a connection to the data lake, and I start turning the faucet on and letting it run into the data lake itself, right? I'm going to fill the data lake up as I'm receiving the data. Consolidation and flexibility kind of go hand in hand, right? I need to be able to have the flexibility to integrate without impacting my internal applications that already exist today, right? Is it a shared file system? Is it a direct connection internally? Is it an SFTP server I'm pulling from? Are they pushing to me? Right, I have to be able to be flexible and support all of the necessary protocols that we use today, as well as whatever's coming from our trading partners, right? So the flexibility to say, yes, I can exchange with FTP, even though that's really bad. We can do it, right? Maybe they do FTP with PGP encryption, so you have to be able to do that piece of it too, right? It's all the nuances of the different integration use cases. From an elasticity perspective, we start talking about how does the engine run. Can I handle big batches of data? Can I handle large files? Can I handle both at the same time? Right? We have to be able to grow and meet all of the different use cases because not all applications are created equal. From a control and scalability, right? We've kind of touched on that, and right, I think it's one of those overlying themes is as these grow out and as these initiatives build up, you're going to get more data and more data. And I'll talk about some examples from a scalability and governance perspective a little later on. But the last piece from a capability is really more of a flexibility around licensing. How am I able, as this project's going to grow, am I able to predict what it's going to cost me to expand the project, right? I start with a smaller little pilot just to kind of get my feet wet and understand what's going on. But once we get that aha moment where, man, that was really cool, we really solved the problem here, management says, hey, we need to do 5 more of these. That was great, but cool, let's do some more, right? That was good job, let's keep working. So now if you didn't scale it right, or you don't have the flexibility, it's going to be it's very costly to expand that out. And it would be good to understand what that looks like initially when you're getting into it, to understand what sort of scope you can have and what the cost is going to be long term. So what we should be looking for, or what we think you should be looking for, is a solution that provides all of these kind of pieces kind of meshed into one. Right? So providing a highly available solution, right? Because maybe this pilot is a single instance and it's not a big deal because it's not mission critical yet. But as soon as it does become mission critical, you better believe that you need high availability so that the data chain from customer to data lake isn't broken. Because if the data doesn't get into the data lake, the analytics engine doesn't run on good data, you don't make good decisions. It's really kind of a chain reaction, right? So if I don't have the ability to ensure that my data transfers are going to happen on time and when I expect them to and securely, the analytics is really not very valuable at all. So when we start looking at, kind of matching analytics to storage frameworks, right, you want to be able to be flexible, right? No one wants to be tied to a specific religion here saying, hey, I'm only going to use HDFS. Well, that's great. But if the analytics tool that you guys want that has the feature set that you're looking for doesn't work with HDFS, your internal solution needs to be flexible enough, your integration solution needs to be flexible enough to support a different data lake type that's supported by the analytics engine. So therein lies the kind of the flexibility in the solution, where you have to be able to be flexible and be able to shift as your needs change. And then from a connection perspective, like I said, it's being able to say yes. Yes to AS2, yes to FTP, yes to SFTP. Yes, we can do encryption, decryption for you. It's all in the package, sure. And being able to consolidate across your ecosystem, saying, hey, I have this line of business here, this line of business here, this line of business over here. Oh, and by the way, we just bought another company and they're way on the other side of the world. We still need to get their data so that we can analyze everything together holistically and get a view of what's going on. And then with all that being said, right, we start talking about how do we move this data? What's the most efficient way? And from an accelerated file transfer perspective, right, the network is the network, the pipe is the pipe. But no one can create any more bandwidth than what's available. So you have to make do with what you have. And the best way to do that is to be as efficient as possible when using an accelerated transfer protocol. So whether it's teeny tiny files, thousands of them at a time, or whether it's one giant glob of data, it's really important that you have the ability to turn on acceleration where you need it, and maybe you don't need it in some cases, right? So you have the flexibility to use it or not use it. Kind of getting down again into the data readiness, right? We talked about, making sure that the data is in the right place with the right information for the analytics engine to run. Again, you start looking at, putting garbage in, garbage out scenario, right? If I don't put good information into the data lake for the analytics engine to run and process, I can't expect a good result. So the timeliness of the data being delivered, as fresh as it can be, will allow the analytics engine to run in its highest capacity. So we've kind of gone through a bunch of topics, and what I would like to do now is kind of put a picture to it, because I'm a visual person, and I think it's easier to kind of assimilate what we're talking about, right? So here we have, on the right-hand side, we have the internal data sources, right? All of your internal file systems, your different applications that you use. All of these applications generate data. And it really depends on what sort of analytics you're trying to run, but that doesn't exclude the fact that we have to get that data from these apps into the data lake. And then on the other side, we have our external data sources, right? Customers, partners, suppliers, SaaS applications, right? Depends on where all your information is, right? As you're expanding, right? It could be, that acquisition we talked about across the world, right? There's another piece, right? I have to go get that data somehow because they're not yet brought into the same network. And then, you need the centralized integration platform to provide the secure protocols across the board, whether it be internal or external. I need the ability to do transformation on that data, potentially, right? Maybe not every time, but you need the option to. Right? You don't want to be stuck saying, oh, well, I can't transform it, but I can move it. You don't want to make your analytics engine work harder than it needs to. And be able to orchestrate that, right? When these applications create files, I'm just going to pull them down, right? I need to know when that's going to happen. I need to be able to have a flexible scheduler that allows me to run on different cadences for different partners for different applications, because there's no reason to look in a directory for the existence of a file from an internal application all day long when it only creates one file at 6 p.m. Why not just turn it on at 6 p.m., grab the file as soon as it's ready, and take off with it, right? Then it's gone. And that's as fast as we can get the data. And then, right, again, governance, paramount, security is a big deal here, right? Once we start talking about this left-hand side over here, you're outside your firewall, outside the comfort zone, you're pulling in credit card information from a credit card supplier, right? That should obviously be secure. You don't want anybody else to get access to that information. It's a big no-no. Or a healthcare company, right? Claims information or benefits information. That doesn't need to be, be shared with the outside world. So once we have that data here on the centralized integration platform, right, it's plumbed directly into, right, like I mentioned before, streamed into the data lake. So you have your flavors of data lake. We put a couple up here just to kind of give you an idea. But really, it's the idea is you guys get to choose what data lake you want, whatever analytics engine you want, right? Whatever supports the look and feel that you guys are going for, and whatever supports your needs. You need to be able to have that flexibility across the board. So moving on one more step, right? So now we're talking about a superior approach, right? How do we provide that type of scenario that we just talked about in the picture, right? You need acceleration because you don't know exactly what sort of data types you're dealing with. But for large data sets, right, you don't want to spend a good example is I was working with a company that sells credit card information to credit card reporting information to their customers. And their backend application generates a 30 gig file every day. And they were SFTPing that file from an internal application server to their virtually private HDFS server where their data lake was. And it was taking them 18 hours from the time that file was created at 5 p.m. on Monday afternoon, 18 hours to get that file just to the front door of the data lake, right? Not in the data lake, just to the front door, from server to server. And then it was taking another 3 to 5 hours, depending on what else was going on, to put that data into the data lake in order to run the analytics for the reports that their customers were paying for. So they were selling their customers approximately a day and a half old data, basically. Well, the idea was, hey, let's find a way to cut that in half, where then we can take the data and move it faster instead of landing it in front of the data lake. We'll just turn the faucet on as we're receiving it, and we'll just run it into the data lake. So now I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm sending the data and I'm populating the data lake at the same time. So not only did I do that, but I also used acceleration, and I turned it from an 18-hour window to a 6-hour window. So now I'm selling day-old data instead of day and a half old, or even less, right, depending on how fast we can make it go. It's incredible. And then they can charge their customers a premium because their data that they're getting, their research data, is twice as fresh as everybody else's. It's incredible. So it's kind of eliminating that hop, right, in front of the data lake that it allows the analytics engine to have the freshest data possible. So that's the acceleration in the streaming. And then the connectors, right? The connectors we're talking about plugging into anything, SaaS applications, big data integration. Wherever your applications, where you need the data from, we can go get it, right? The idea is that we can pull data from any data source and allow you guys to be flexible and say, oh, well, we have data over here, but we don't know how to get it out of this application and into the data lake. Well, cool. We've got connectors for it. The control, that's really more that external piece, and it ties into the governance, being able to access the data from outside. Getting your hands on the data is really the biggest thing, right, because it's at the core of what we're doing. The next piece is the ease of use, right? Now, we've talked about all these things. You don't want to sit in front of a screen or a putty session or a shell session and write code all day, right? That's not any fun. So you want to make sure that it's easy to use and consumable by all your users that are going to be using the system. So a simplistic approach, right? Templating, right? Being able to understand, hey, once I have my backend plumbed, right? The backend being this integration here, right? Between the platform and the data lake. Once I have that, if I add a new application that I need data to, well, I have a template for that, right? I already have the backend plumbed. I've created that integration already. So I'm just going to clone that over and over and over again. And I'll change and plug in whatever, if it's another customer, right? All right, here's a login or a user ID. Or, hey, you want us to pull the data from you? Give us your information and we'll pull it from you. But at the end of that trip, right, we're going to receive it and stream it directly into the data lake regardless. So it's a really nice, easy feature. The ease of use is really paramount. And then the final bit here is really to have a complete integration solution, right, that does everything that you need, right, whether it be transformation or translation, as well as a host of secure protocols that are available for whatever your customers need, right, and have the visibility around all of that to share where that data is at any given time. All right, so let's take a look at a customer example. I think everybody's familiar with AT&T. So AT&T and Clio have been working together for a couple of years now, and they came to us looking for a way to move massive amounts of call center data. So the call center data is basically when you call a helpline and they say, hey, this call may be recorded for quality and training purposes, that's the data they're moving. So when they do record the call, that data has to go somewhere. And that audio file gets generated and stored on-premise, wherever that call center is, daily. And every day, that data has to be moved to their I forget which one it was, but their data lake, so that they can do analytics on those audio files. So they had, I think, 19 different data centers, and I think, let's see, I think the number's right here. Yeah, so between 1 and 3 terabytes daily, we're plumbing everything into this data lake from all these different call centers across the world. And the idea that they were looking for is they needed the ability to support multiple protocols, because not everybody had the same, and being able to exchange data with these backend systems. How do we get this data out of these systems where these calls are being recorded, and how do we plumb that and stick it into the data lake so that they can not only meet their requirements from a federal mandate by saving this information in a single place, but be efficient about it and not take too much time, right? Because if their data wasn't in the right spot, maybe they're not able to understand they had issues with a call, someone complained. They have to be able to go back and look at that and find out what that call was about. And I think this is a really good quote from Rob from AT&T was, Clio is one of the best kept secrets in the industry. We're out there, we're making all these things happen. Everything we've talked about today, we take care of. So if we were to take our initial slide talking about the market dynamics and challenges facing companies, and we were to apply what AT&T did, we can see that what we enabled initially was these 5 blocks, right? We took all their historical data that was disparate in different places, and we kind of collated it into a data lake that they're running analytics on and storing, as well as making sure that it's timely, right? It had to be a daily thing. It had to happen every night. We collected all this information, and we sent it off every night. And across all their different siloed ecosystems across the board, with timely information and reliability and security, right? It had to happen, and it had to be secure. What we also allowed them to do was provided them a way to move forward in their digital transformation, making them more efficient and more agile, as well as providing them the ability to look at more of a predictive analytics model versus reactive. So it's not just this one use case. There's 5 or 6 other use cases around the solution that we provided that they're using to move towards this predictive analytics model. And it's a really, really, really slick use case, actually. So to kind of keep going down into the additional use cases, right, we're talking about, let's take a transportation one, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, where we have, a weather system with a truck or trucking goods that are, going to be impacted by, say they're moving north through Colorado and there's a storm through the mountain pass and they're stuck, right? They don't really have a way to go around. Well, the earlier they may have, if they were able to capture that weather information and compare it with their truck routing information and say, hey, this is going to take 3 extra days to get there. Well, maybe if I go around the storm, go around the pass, go a different direction, I can get there in a day and a half extra. So it's not going to take me 3 days to wait in Colorado for the roads to clear. I can go a little bit east or west, dodge that mountain pass, go a different direction, and still deliver the goods on time. It's really just an understanding of all the different aspects of the data and allowing the analytics tool to do its job. But in order for that to happen, it has to have all the relevant data to make those decisions, or else the decision it makes or provides you the outcome may not be very good. It may not be accurate. So if we were to take a healthcare example, there was a customer that I was working with, I guess it was a couple of years back. They were doing a study on a disease that they couldn't share, but they were basically doing human genomic studies in different labs across the U.S. And a human genome at a data perspective is somewhere between 30 and 50 gigs per person. So they were talking about 10 to 15,000 people's genomic studies across the U.S., and they needed to compile all that data in one place. So they had a couple options, right? They're like, well, we can load this all up on disk and ship it across the country and then unbox it and load it in manually and, move the files into the data lake manually. I was like, well, yeah, you could do that, sure, but it's going to take a lot of time. It's not very efficient, and I think that you're better off, finding a solution that can, you can extract that data and move it over the web and get it into one spot for you guys to process it faster and be able to run the analytics and do your studies faster, right? And that's what we ended up doing. We built a network from all their labs to their, basically their corporate headquarters where their data center was, where that had the data lake hooked up to it, and we really just wrote the data there. And it really was incredible to see how much data they had. I mean, they had 15,000 people and 30 gigs ahead. I mean, that's a ton of data that they were moving. And all they were doing was running it into an analytics engine and basically doing studies to build immunizations for whatever disease they were working on, right? And it's not just that, right? You can expand that use case from a healthcare perspective across pharmaceuticals, across a distribution network. It's really just a massive, I mean, the same thing goes with imaging scans and storing all that information. It's crazy. And then when you look at retailers, right, when we start looking at walking into Walmart in the app and it already knows who you are and it knows what you bought the last time, it's like, hey, are you still looking for this? Geez, first of all, I don't like that they track me like that. But second of all, it's just that customer, that extra touch from them to the customer saying, hey, are you sure you don't want to do this? So I have 4 children, and I don't mind the coupons from Target and Kroger and Publix, right? I typically check out and I get at least something baby related, right? I have diapers or baby wipes or something. And it's really nice to have those come at you where you're not even asking for it. It's like, oh, how about that? Look, you know that I buy a ton of this stuff, and here's a coupon for you, right? It's that customer delight. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll come back. I'll use the coupon and I'll get a discount. So kind of at a holistic view, right? We're talking about, again, Clio Integration Cloud will enable you to perform all of the actions we've talked about today, cover all of the use cases, and include all of the bits of your ecosystem to allow you to perform the analytics that we have that you guys are looking for. So you guys pick your analytics platform, you pick your data lake infrastructure that goes with that, and then you use Clio Integration Cloud to stitch all of your different pieces of your ecosystem together and provide you with that one single platform from a visibility and reliability perspective. And I'll pause there for questions.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Excellent presentation. Just a couple of thoughts there. I really appreciated the examples that you provided. But to me, it seems really hard to believe that some companies are relying on those homegrown or one-off integration tools to connect all these multiple data sources to feed their data lakes. Especially when you look at the connections and the volumes of data involved in these use cases, like the omni-channel example, or even the onboard devices within a fleet of trucks in the transportation industry. It's just staggering, the amount of data that needs to be channeled through to these data lakes. So again, great job, Brian. All right, let's take a look at some questions that have come in during the course of the presentation. Let's see, this one looks like it's around our point on consolidation. You talked about how centralizing integrations on a single platform helps with data flows, but how do you recommend we go about replacing existing connections without disrupting current workflows?
Great question. So the idea around the Clio Integration Cloud is to provide exactly that, the flexibility to provide a low-risk impact to any existing system. So it's really a like-for-like switch. So now, when you start talking about adding new pieces or swapping things out, maybe the way that it works today isn't super efficient. So there could be the possibility of gaining efficiencies by moving off of what you did before into the Clio Integration Cloud framework. So it really kind of depends on the exact use case, But if you're exchanging files on a file system, application drops files in a shared file system, we pick it up and we move it. Now, would it be easier if you didn't have to pick it up from the shared file system and I could just query the application directory and extract the data? It's one way to do it. It's just about how much disruption you want to have. And the idea is to initially have zero impact. So if there's a new application that comes online and they want to exchange data, we just pick it up from the same share. Just so no impact. The application has no change. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I believe so. All right, so you did talk about visibility here, and I think this question will tie into what you presented earlier, but the visitor asked, what type of data analytics does Clio offer?
So what Clio provides is really more of a persona-based at the data level, right? So you can see what user applications or what applications are exchanging data. It's not necessarily the analytics engine itself. If we were to go back to this slide here. So we provide visibility to all of what's inside here, right? Any external exchanges with the customer, we'll be able to tell you where the file came from, who exchanged data, where it landed, the time it took, all those bits of information, as well as when we put it in the data lake. But when we start talking about big data analytics in a truer sense, right, the analytics engine's over here on the right outside of the Clio box, right, that's a separate application. So we don't do the analytics from a big data perspective. We provide you with the technical file transfer information around where the file came from, how it was received, and being able to follow it throughout the process to get it to the data lake.
That's right. Makes sense. All right. This next one says, our biggest issue around big data is making sure that we can keep up with all of the new data sources that are coming in, which I know you talked about. How do you ensure you keep all of the data flows that are active without disrupting any of the current connections?
Great question. So inside the Clio Integration Cloud, we have a framework that allows us to scale linearly depending on the requirements needed. So we have the ability to kind of work in a fashion that allows us to implement additional servers behind the scenes. So if you see, what's a good example? As you see an increase in volume, maybe you acquired a new business and you need to ingest all that information into the data lake, or even not even to the data lake, right? Maybe you had a merger and you needed to exchange all of their trading partners' information and put it onto your framework and sunset all their old legacy systems, right? So that's a huge influx, right? So what do, right? So maybe by studying what sort of information is coming in, right, we can increase linearly by adding more servers behind the scenes to stack it in an active capacity so that there's no impact to the current data flows that are flowing through it. So we can kind of visualize and understand what's going on and kind of gauge that impact and say, okay, we're running with 2 today, and we're going to add add something of equal size to it. So instead of impacting the day-to-day stuff, we don't want to slow any of that down. So what we'll do is we'll add 2 more nodes, and it'll allow us to continue processing our current load plus all of this new load. So you really will have and see no impact, and it's a transparent process. You just add servers, they join the cluster, and the cluster syncs across both nodes, and all of your information is already there.
I'm going to add on to that question. I mean, you talked about replacing some connections, I think, in an earlier point. But can you explain a little bit more about partner and application onboarding and how you can accelerate those processes? Because they're very time intensive, and one of the common things that we hear at Clio is how long it takes to onboard a new partner or a new application, and what that does to your operations and obviously your bottom line ultimately.
Absolutely. So when we start looking at trading partner onboarding, I like to use the example of basically the REST APIs that we have. inside the Clio Integration Cloud. So we have both operational and administrative APIs. And what I've seen a lot of customers do is leverage those administrative APIs to build kind of a front-end portal that allows them to more rapidly onboard trading partners. So you can almost build your own self-service portal or tie into an existing self-service portal. So if you already have an onboarding tool that you use today, it's just cumbersome to use. We have REST APIs behind the scenes that will simplify that process, where you can have the customers onboard themselves. And as part of the workflow, right, you'll get an alert that says, hey, here's a new registration. We're not going to turn it on yet because we need to approve it. But from an onboarding perspective, right, we simplify the process by making it easier and more compact. Absolutely. Great question.
All right. Here's one that just came in. What is the extent of customer engagement and interaction? I understand Clio does not participate in the analytical aspect post-data integration. So once a data integration is established and a customer needs are satisfied, is there a model for continued engagement to continue building beyond the customer's original inquiry?
As far as leveraging the Clio Integration Cloud, absolutely, right? It's not just funneling data into a data lake, right? We have a whole host of data integration capabilities as far as transformation inside the same Clio Integration Cloud. This presentation was primarily focused at leveraging the data movement aspect, but we also have a data transformation component. So it would really depend on what other additional use cases the customer may have as part of the ongoing, evolution of their digital transformation.
Excellent. All right. Here's another one that just came in. You had mentioned the healthcare example earlier. How would you know that all of your data is truly secure within those regulated industries?
How would you know? So I guess that initial piece, right, it starts, first of all, at the data itself. So if the data is, let's take the example of I have an internal application that creates benefits data that needs to be, or claims data that needs to be submitted to a customer. So as long as the trust is established internally that says, hey, I don't need to encrypt this data internally, that's fine. So the data moves from application through the Clio Integration Cloud. Before it goes to be made ready for the customer, we encrypt the data. So the data is encrypted with the customer's information. And now we submit a transaction to the customer and we send it off to them, or they can come pick it up, right? It really depends on what use case you want to use. So once the data is encrypted, right, we're sure that it's secure. We transfer it over a secure channel, AS2, SFTP, you pick, right? Data gets to customer over a secure channel with the payload also encrypted. Once it lands on the customer site, they then decrypt it, right? But then at that point, they are the owners of that data. So it is ensured that it's encrypted with their information so that they are the only ones that can decrypt it. And that would be a full end-to-end, hey, I trust my application all the way through to their back-end application. So that would ensure security across the whole channel. And that's just one example. There's a bunch of different iterations of what that looks like. Maybe the back-end application wants to encrypt that data initially, and no one else can see it, right? That's really more the traditional HIPAA compliance piece, right? Application creates data with the customer certificate, and it encrypts the data on the back end so that nobody else but the customer, even internally, right? Trust no one, internally can see that information. So it comes out of the application in the form of a file. Before it's written to the file system, it's encrypted. Once that file is then picked up, it's encrypted. No one can see it. No one else has the key except the customer. So then we follow the same process through, right? We send the data to the customer then decrypts it. So that it's really, different nuances to that flow, right? It just kind of depends on what the use case is specifically. But in either case, right, the Clio Integration Cloud platform can do any of those different scenarios. It's just a matter of what the use case is.
Excellent. All right, Brian, thank you so much. I think I'm going to wrap up the Q&A to let you folks know about our next webinar, which is happening on Wednesday, November 14th. This presentation will outline the benefits and potential roadblocks of IT systems modernization initiatives and what you can do to build a modern integration framework that supports current and future transformation projects. So registration will open shortly, and you can go to our website at clio.com/events to register for that one happening next month. And if you'd like to learn more about how to consolidate and accelerate integration flows to support such projects like big data analytics, or if you'd like to learn more best practices and see what other companies are doing to support digital transformation initiatives, check us out on our social channels or our blog, or just give us a call. We'll always be here to answer the phone. So thank you again for spending time with Brian and I today. We'll definitely look forward to seeing you on our IT modernization webinar next month, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thanks again.